We are going to be with Sapita McKenzie from the Toronto Public Library. She's going to take us through how to design a data platform to strengthen community impact. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. So I'm Sapita McKenzie, and I'm from Toronto Public Library. So today I'm going to share a story a lot of people don't know about building Bridge. And Bridge is a data solution platform built by libraries for libraries. Bridge helps demonstrate the essential role that libraries play in advancing digital inclusion and supporting communities. Bridge was designed by Toronto Public Library and supported by a generous Government of Ontario grant. So it's a little bit municipal, it's a little bit provincial. What we ultimately do is we understand that Toronto Public Library is the busiest, biggest library, has a leadership role to play to support other libraries that don't quite have what we have. And so what we do is apply our lessons across the public sector and show how you can design inclusive, scalable platforms to centralize data collection and visualization and effectively measure outcomes to demonstrate impact and advance equity. So when you think of a library, you probably have an image like this that comes to mind. Quiet spaces, traditional services, books. I can't tell you how many times people say, oh, you must just read all day. And I was just telling a colleague here, I probably do everything other than that on the front line, okay? We are social workers, psychologists, crisis managers. We do all kinds of things. And one of the things a lot of people don't realize is this is public libraries, right? So public libraries look very different today than they did before. We offer 3D printers, robotics, laptops, tablet lending, Wi-Fi hotspots, AI workshops, coding and design classes, and much, much more. I don't think people realize the technology infrastructure that is housed at a public library. So I want you to challenge you to rethink of libraries as these critical providers, especially for those who need it the most. We provide all this for free to community members at no cost to them. So that's why Toronto Public Library is taking on this role to help other libraries standardize outcome measurement, to help all libraries be able to measure and communicate impact, to help to bridge the digital divide ultimately. That's the main goal. Libraries have evolved to meet the critical need for technology services and digital literacy in our communities. Yet, with limited budgets, and those budgets are continuing to get cut, and rising demand, sustaining and expanding that technology infrastructure is an absolute struggle for most libraries. So we want to help them be able to support them in keeping up with evolving technology services in order to remain significant. So the mission is clear for Library Impact Ontario. It is a suite of services that aims to help libraries measure digital inclusion and impact, enable data-informed decision-making, strengthen advocacy and accountability through data storytelling, but most important of all, build data confidence and collaboration among staff at any skill level. Data is extremely new for the library sector. We do a lot of stuff manually. We don't do a lot of stuff automated. It certainly wasn't a part of my library school studies, so it's very, very new for our library sector. So whether serving a rural community or a large urban center, Library Impact Ontario adapts to each library's unique needs. And it's purpose-built by libraries for libraries. Our suite of services includes Bridge, which I will get more into later, and that's the technological tool. That's the platform that we created from scratch in order to provide customizable surveys, standardized outcome measurement, dashboards, data visualization. But what we realized is you can make a tool, the saying, build it, they will come. They won't necessarily come, right? And it's completely free. A technology tool like this would cost lots of money for libraries, and we're giving it to them for free. But they still won't use it, right? That doesn't mean that there's a lineup at the door of libraries ready to use it, right? Staff capacity is at an ultimate low in public libraries. And so what we realized is we also have to supplement the tool with data literacy learning and support. And that ultimately builds that culture of data literacy amongst the sector, amongst staff at any skill level. So how did this all come to be? Kind of the evolution of where we are today. We started as a tiny pilot project in 2016 through a small grant with just 8 libraries. And through that consultation at that stage, it revealed that technology service was the most complicated and expensive service that we provide. And it was the one that libraries were struggling the most. So there are other tools out there that maybe do all the services that libraries provide, measure it, have surveys. There's other tools out there that were American, but not Canadian. So we found all those things to be true, but we couldn't find something that allowed for one space for all of us to share our data, be able to measure it, benchmark it, and really work together. So it just didn't exist off the shelf. So what we decided to do is to build it from scratch, which I have to say is quite rare in the public sector. We more than often buy something off the shelf and prefer to do that. But there's some great benefits by doing it the way that we did. We were able to really evolve, grow, adapt, take insights along the way, do it our way, and make something completely from scratch with library insight for libraries, which is quite rare. So today, more than 60 libraries across Ontario participate, and each phase of Library Impact Ontario produces a published report. And what that report does is also help our sector in terms of advancing the information and knowledge and data that's out there about what libraries do. Most of you probably don't realize everything that libraries do. There's a lot of misconceptions, misinformation, so it also is helping our sector as a whole. What makes this particularly unique, though, is the collaboration factor. So it's more than just a tool. It's a place where across geographic boundaries, and Ontario is quite tough geographically. You could drive 4-6 hours from one library to another, right? So it's a way for us to not be siloed, be able to work together, connect together, be able to be stronger as a whole. Often you hear, one is not very strong, but a fist is, right? You hear that saying all the time. And that's much the same case. If one library tries to advocate for funding, you probably won't get it, right? But if one library connects with other similar peer libraries and tries to advocate for that funding or for there not to be cuts, it's going to be a lot stronger of a case. So that collaboration factor, allowing libraries to no longer be siloed, is really what makes us unique. And so through this growing pressure to demonstrate our value, sustain services, and make tough decisions, we're able to really work together. Bridge provides a model for how public institutions can work together to use data storytelling to advocate, adapt, and innovate. So I've spoken at many conferences, and a lot of times you usually have someone in the audience. I actually had someone downstairs tell me how much they love the public library. They know their public library, it's steps away, and they absolutely love it. And I promise you, I don't pay these people to say these things, although people probably think I do. It just comes out. The second that I mention I work for Toronto Public Library, someone always mentions that they love their local public library. And I have 20 plus years on the front line in the toughest neighborhoods in Toronto. And I have heartfelt story after heartfelt story of how we have completely transformed and changed lives at the public library. But if I tell that story to a funder or a grant provider, they're likely not to sign that check, right? Just based on that story. What we're realizing is that they want data. They want outcome data. They want data that shows transformative change. What impact does the library have on the community? And so as the sector is rapidly changing, we want to ultimately build a tool that does exactly that, but does it in an easy to use, automated way. Because the reality is staffing capacity and skills are low. So in order to be successful, we really focused on being agile, constantly iterating. So enhancements, usability testing, responding quickly to the user needs, identifying obvious pain points, and being able to address them for quick wins, right? So that has really helped us. Secondly, being user-centric, right? So everything, every change that has come to place for Bridge from beginning to end came directly from other libraries, whether it's my frontline experience or other libraries who have come to me and said, hey, I really wish it did this, or I really wish, you had this feature. All of those ideas generated what is today, right? So being user-centric is absolutely the foundation of what you see today. And lastly, and probably the most important, we had to build trust. Nobody wants to spend their time, their capacity, incorporate something in their work that is going to poof disappear, right? So the reality in public sector is it has to be worth my time. It has to be trusting. I have to build that trust. I have to know that you're going to be here and that it's worth that time. So building trust was really important. So what we did was we made sure we were accountable. We had transparency, regular communication along with public reporting, so the published reports I was talking about. We built strong sector partnerships, and so all of those were non-negotiable, and we eliminated silos. These principles helped us grow credibility and increase adoption. So I'll be honest, it's been quite a journey. This is how we started, and this is where we are now. It was quite clunky. It was ugly, to say the least. But it's a journey when you build something from scratch, right? Like if you buy something off the shelf, it looks great, right? But maybe it doesn't do all the things you want it to do, right? So you had to bear with us, and many libraries did bear with us as we went through many phases of enhancements in order to be what we are today, which, we listened. That's what it came down to. And we had to really understand why libraries dropped off. They didn't have the time, capacity, because it involves so much training or manuals in order to be able to use it. Nobody has time for that, right? So we listened, we redesigned, we invested in the user experience. That was the most important thing that we did in order to get to where we are today. Now, today, Bridge is known for its ease of use and reliability. It's designed for staff at any skill level with minimal time commitment. So Bridge is a fully cloud-based on Microsoft Azure with the 3 layers in its development. So development layer, a QA layer, a production layer. Everything I do with the vendor is in the development layer. Then we have a QA layer where we test and make sure everything's working and have certain flags in place to catch things. And then we have the production layer, which is what the user sees on the front end. That's my layman terms explanation of this. I do not have a technical background, so I'm sure many of you would explain it differently. But that's basically how it works. We do have a strong data governance, which is central to Bridge. We adhere to strict privacy and information collection policies, ensure all our data remains in Canada, and maintain the higher standards of data security. So why does this all matter? right? So despite widespread assumptions about access to technology, the digital divide exists. Driven by affordability, geography, systemic barriers, vulnerable communities are the most affected. We need to dig deeper past our own unconscious biases. Most people probably think, oh, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has internet. By now, everybody must have internet at home. Everybody must have a computer at home. And the reality in the neighborhoods I've worked at is that's not the case. You would be surprised the absolute most basic needs that people do not have. So libraries are often the only access point to technology. But it's not enough just to say that. As I mentioned before, we have growing pressure to provide proof of that, evidence of that. So that's why we need data. Bridge zeroes in on technology services, the most expensive, fast-changing service pillar. So one example I can give from our most recent published report is that we found that for those using the library for internet access, we're much more likely to not have any internet access at home at 16%. That is much higher than the general population at 6%. So the majority of those coming to the library to use internet, they absolutely need that access. It's dire. And what we found is in northern communities in Ontario, that percentage was 30%. So the library itself providing internet is absolutely vital in those communities. So what we see in libraries, gaps in digital access, mirrors what many of you probably see in education, housing, and health, right? It's not enough to assume that this infrastructure exists and that's it, that's enough. We need data to understand who's being left behind. And that's exactly what Bridge does. So Bridge quantifies equity and impact by showing library technology services and how it addresses needs, how it changes people's lives. You use technology at the library and you landed a job. You use technology at the library and you advanced your education. You use library technology and you were able to be connected with someone, have that social belonging, right? So these are ways, these are outcomes of using library technology, and that's what Bridge quantifies. It also allows us to optimize resource management for smarter allocation and strengthen advocacy. So the benchmarking, working together with libraries, being able to compare with each other, that strengthens advocacy. So unlike generic solutions, Bridge is built with frontline library experience. This is our outcome framework. It's unique to Bridge. And what it says is that we have two primary outcomes, digital inclusion and digital literacy. And those two outcomes must be met before they can unlock secondary outcomes. And the secondary outcomes are community social engagement, civic engagement, creativity and innovation, and workforce development. And our KPIs are built around these outcomes. The Bridge platform gathers data through three components: a customer-facing survey, or patron survey we call it. That's what measures the customer's experience and impact with technology services. It has a voluntary demographic questions at the end, which is how we get equity data from the survey. And it also has open feedback, so you're able to collect those stories that are still meaningful. And then we have a staff survey. Staff survey measures staff perspective and training needs. Staff are the gateways of technology, right? So if they're not comfortable with technology, that's going to affect the experience of the customer. So it's just as important to assess our staff as it is our customers. And lastly, there's an availability and usage indicator. And this measures service volume provided, so internet access, resource usage. Libraries choose how much and how little of these components to use. So you have flexibility. The reality is that a small rural library is probably not going to take on every single aspect of, Bridge. And that's fine. You have the flexibility to take on as much or as little as works for your capacity. So as I said, one size does not fit all. That's why we offer 2 flexible versions to choose from based on library's capacity and need. You literally, a click of a button on or off shows you the Bridge Standard version or shows you the Bridge Pro version. And this just allows libraries to not get overwhelmed by all the features and dashboards. Maybe it's too much for you, so you want to scale back, you choose the Bridge Standard version. If you really want to dig deep and go granular and do a lot of customization, then we recommend the Bridge Pro. Either way, whatever version you choose, you get custom benchmarking, automated reporting, qualitative insights. So the Bridge platform offers flexible benchmarking. You can benchmark by peer group size or region, Ontario-wide aggregated data, and longitudinal. Now, the data is only as good as libraries' participation, right? So this is what I always say, right? The more libraries that participate, the more we fill the database with data, the stronger that these benchmarking capabilities are going to be, right? So sustained use is very important, consistent use is very important, and then working together so that the more libraries participate, the better the data gets. We also offer filtering, so you can filter by a specific technology, you can filter by one of the demographic questions, or a specific time period. And this makes impact measurement both meaningful and actionable. In 2025, we introduced one-click automated reports. So we call them the Key Highlight Report, Ontario Benchmark Report, Historical Snapshot Report, and the Equity Snapshot Report. And these one-click reports came directly out of feedback from Ontario Library saying, hey, I want something quick that I can just put a date range and run to a meeting or run to a board member or run to a stakeholder and be able to advocate for my library. And that's exactly what these are. They're also emailed to you annually, straight to your inbox. So I'm trying to make everything as easy as possible for Ontario libraries. So we know that data is very new for the library sector. So this is why we complement Bridge with our free learning portal to build data literacy among library staff. It's a professional development hub with training templates, coaching, to build staff confidence, using data for decision-making and advocacy. So what we realized is equally true across the public sector. The fact is that data is new for frontline staff. A lot of organizations don't have technical staff. They don't have a data person. They don't have, a technical staff member. The librarian is probably checking in the books, being a librarian, being IT, and being, a psychologist all at the same time in a small rural library, right? So wearing many, many, many hats. So we need to foster a culture of data literacy. And we do that through self-paced courses, webinars, guides, lunch and learn workshops, so we can network and not be siloed and talk to each other across Ontario. And we do templates for reports and presentations to save time for libraries. And we also have office hours for in-person kind of tailored support. So this ensures that even small libraries with limited budgets and non-technical staff can build data confidence. So we publish biannual reports. This is our most recent report, which is hot off the press, maybe a month now. And so this standardized data helps libraries advocate for funding and targeted solutions. Here's a look at the key findings from our most recent publication. And you can find it on our website, tpl.ca/impact, in the Report and Findings tab. So what we found is 59% of users rely on library technology because they would not have access otherwise. Marginalized groups, particularly low-income households, newcomers, and people with disabilities, benefited the most from library technology services. And regional disparities exist. The digital divide is most pronounced in Northern Ontario and in small libraries. So in closing, Library Impact Ontario shows the power of collective action. By leveraging data, libraries can advocate for sustained investment in technology services, demonstrate the value of libraries in bridging the digital divide, and ensure every community has equitable access to technology. Bridge is more than a library platform, it's a model for the public sector. How you can balance efficiency with equity, foster a culture of data literacy, and empower every team member. That's how we move towards a future where data doesn't just measure services, but it transforms them. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks for sharing that. Any questions? I will take in the back with the glasses first, and then you. Thanks.
Thank you. Just curious, when you get to the usage and availability, is that driven off of like them swiping a card in the library and understanding their use of, how long they were on a computer or what books they might have taken out, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so not so much the card aspect, because a lot of the things that we do with technology services is actually without a card. We consider library cards a barrier a lot of times, and you'd be surprised how many things in a library are not done with a library card. So it's very hard to track. So in one sense, you're filling a void because you're reducing barriers. In another sense, on our aspect, we can't track a lot of things because we don't actually ask for a library card constantly. But yes, you're right. What we do is track, like, how long were you on the computer? How many times was the computer used? How many Wi-Fi connections was there? Well, we have something called the annual survey of libraries. And so basically the government comes up with certain stats that we have to collect in order for us to get our public funding every year. And so the basis is almost like that, but like way more. What we're saying is basically the government collects very little data, which is helpful, but not a whole lot on technology services. And what we're saying is, hey, let's aim really, really high and collect a lot more about what we're doing and share it with each other and benchmark and see trends. Because what the government's collecting it's so basic, right? Like, for example, the government doesn't even collect bandwidth. When we do our funding and when we do our annual survey, they actually don't collect what is the bandwidth of internet in libraries. And that's something that's actually really important, because I don't know if you saw the news, bandwidth is really lacking in northern libraries, right? And there's actually been recent funding to support northern libraries with internet. And so that's yet another thing. We collect that, we measure that, and we've always thought that was very important, but that's not something that we're required to.
Please go ahead. Just two in front, the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just if I understood correctly, two of your data feeds are the patron surveys and also staff surveys. Can you comment on the response rates on annual basis?
Yeah, for example, the most recent report, 6,500 respondents across Ontario, right? The response rate is so different depending on the library. Toronto Public Library we actually do the survey every other month now. We do it about quarterly now. Some people do it quarterly, some people do it every other month. We used to do it monthly, and that was too much. So we do it quarterly now. And, TPL could collect 600 to 900 respondents in a single survey period, right? Then you have a small library who collects maybe 10 to 20, right? So it's all relative to your community, but when the data collects over time, and that's what I always tell libraries, one single survey might not be impactful or statistically sound, but that survey builds and builds and builds, that data builds and builds and builds, in a year's time, you really have some really good, profound data.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. That was really amazing work. I wanted to ask about the data literacy component in terms of getting staff to be more comfortable and more involved and more confident in using Bridge and other, technology and tools in the library. How do you encourage them to use what I'm hearing is like self-serve type of learning development?
Yeah, so it's all trial and error. With the data literacy program, we used to partner with an urban library council, which is a US-based library organization, and we did some workshops with them. We did workshops where you had to attend. We've done workshops where, things were required. And up to now, we realize the best thing that works is asynchronous learning. So, or having options at least to be able to watch recordings because they couldn't attend live, to be able to, learn at their own pace. Because when you force them, to attend a specific date and time, the reality is the library falls apart and they can't attend that day, right? So everybody calls in sick and they have to, run the library. So it's really trial and error, but what I found is just giving lots of options. Everybody has a different learning style. Everybody's a different level of data. I have some users that are know way more about data than me, even though I'm running the project. And then I have other users that are just the most basic level, right? So that's what that portal does, is it gives you from everything from the bare basics to really advanced stuff and all different ways to view it.
Awesome. Thank you. We're actually out of time. You could come and chat with her up here. No problem. So we have the last session downstairs in the main hall. That was really great.
Thank you.